Hi all, this is Tanishka from Edureka and I welcome you all to this session. Today I'm here with yet another new topic, that is ARM templates. So let's quickly have a glance on today's agenda. So today we'll learn about what are ARM templates, then we'll see how are these ARM templates useful to us. Then we'll have a in-depth knowledge about the template and the template design, and later we'll also see how these ARM templates actually work. Once we understand that, we'll also look onto the key components of ARM templates. And once we understand the whole concept, at last we'll have a quick demo on these ARM templates. So before we get started, make sure you subscribe to our Edureka YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to never miss any updates. Also, if you're interested in Azure certification and training, do check out to the link given below in the description. Alright, so our first topic is what are ARM templates? So as you can see in the definition, ARM template is a block of code that defines the infrastructure and the configuration of your project. So here it means that it is a way of deploying infrastructure as a code to the Azure environment. So here you create a project in that you define the objects you want, and you also specify their properties, names and their types, and you convert it into a JSON file. And once you upload this file into the Azure, what does ARM API do? It understands the whole code, which is in the JSON file. So here, the JSON file is then checked into the source control and managed like any other code file. So here, what ARM templates are like, they give you the ability to roll out within the Azure environment. So it can contain the contents of the entire resource group, like they can manage the whole resource group, or it can also contain one or more resources which is assigned under that particular resource group. So when a template is deployed, you have the option of either using complete or the incremental code, like part by part codes. So if you go with the complete mode, it deletes any object that are not visible or that does not appear within the template. Okay. So if you have a template and in that, if you are not able to see any objects, so you can delete from those resource group which you're deploying. So in this scenario, whatever you're deploying into the resource group, like you will see that many amount of objects into that particular resource group. In the incremental deployment, it uses basically the template to the additional resources to an existing resource group. So the benefit of this is that you don't lose any infrastructure that is missing from the template, but the downside is that you will have to clear up old resources from the other way. So it's like whatever new resources you are adding into the existing resource group, that won't delete, you are able to see those. But once you are adding new, then you need to filter out the previous resources as well. In this case, the ideal deployment is complete, but it does mean that you need to have a good automated deployment pipeline with at least one test environment where you can validate that template and it doesn't rip the heart of your production. Like it should not ruin your management. Now that we've come to know what are ARM templates, now let us see why choose ARM templates. So how are they useful to us? What makes it so special? So there are a few advantages which validates that how ARM templates are useful to use in Azure environment. So we'll look onto them one by one. So our first is declarative syntax. So what does it means is that the RM template allows you to create and deploy the entire Azure infrastructure declaratively. So it means here that if you're using the RM template, you can create it while declaring all your by declaring all the codes in the JSON file. You declare your needs, your properties, and everything. It is very declarative. You declare, then it allows you to deploy it in that way itself. Okay. For example, you can not only deploy virtual machines but also network infrastructure, storage systems, and any other resources that you need within that Azure environment. You don't have to go one by one, like first you create virtual machine and then you can go to storage account. You can create it at once. Next is repeatable results. So here you can repeatedly deploy your infrastructure throughout the development lifecycle and you have the confidence that your resources are deployed in a consistent manner. It is not you can only deploy once, you can deploy it more than one time. So, and you get the consistent results out of it. Like whenever you deploy, you will get that much appropriate results consistently. So here the templates are idempotent, which means that you can deploy the same template many times and the same resource types in the same state. So if you have created a template, you can deploy it more than one time. So whenever you deploy, the resources under it will give you the same results. You can develop one template that represents the desired state rather than developing lots of separate templates to represent updates. Next is orchestration. So, what do I mean here is that you don't have to worry about the complexities of ordering operations. So, the resource manager orchestrates the development of interdependent resources so they are created in the correct order. So, here you don't have to worry that in which order, like you don't have to think that which one should be deployed first, which one should be deployed second. So, ARM template manages, it reads the code and it manages itself and it makes it in order which has to be deployed first, which has to be deployed last. So it is done by the ARM itself. You don't have to do it manually. When possible, Resource Manager deploys resource in parallel so your deployment finish faster than serial deployment. It can also manage your time by just deploying the resources parallelly. So it can do the multitasking work, like it can deploy two resources at once so that you get the faster results. And you don't need so many commands to it. You can just deploy the template through one command rather than through multiple imperative commands. So here you just need to like hit a command to run this particular template and it all your other tasks are done simultaneously. Next is modular files. So here you can break your templates into smaller reusable components and link them together at the deployment time. You can also nest the one template inside the another template. So you can break down these templates into one or more parts and then you can link them. You can also just create a nested loop out of like you can create a proper chain how your deployment should process. Next is you can create any Azure resources. So as we said, you can immediately use new Azure resources and features into the templates. As soon as a resource provider introduces new resource, you can deploy those resources through these templates. So you don't have to like wait for the tools or modules to be updated before using the new services. If you want that particular service to be included in your template, it automatically grasps that particular service and it makes it ready to deploy. Next is testing. So when we talk here about testing, you can make sure that your template follows recommended guidelines by testing it with the ARM template toolkit. So what does it do? It helps you like to test whether your whole process or your whole project is running smoothly and based on the requirements or not. So the test kit is a PowerShell script that you can just download from GitHub or any portal. So the main benefit of this toolkit is that it makes it easier for you to develop expertise using the template language itself. Everything is within the ARM itself. You don't have to have a separate testing toolkit for it. All right. Okay, so one of our folks named Rohan has asked, is there any other toolkit available? So as I said, Rohan, the testing process is within the ARM manager. So ARM itself has its own toolkit. So when you're deploying a particular template into that ARM API, so once it is in the process of deployment, it checks once it is deployed, it will automatically go under the testing process and it will test the whole template over there. So you don't need an extra toolkit for it because ARM is one whole soul thing. It is managing your services, it is managing your resources, whatever you're deploying into the Azure. Lastly, once it is deployed, it is also testing it whether that particular resource is working smoothly or not. I hope you got clear with this. Moving ahead, we have deployment blueprints. So before we see what is the advantage of these blueprints, let us understand what are basically blueprints. So just as blueprints allow a particular engineer or an architecture to sketch a project's design or the parameters. So Azure Blueprints is also one kind of them that enables the cloud architects or the central information technology groups to define a repeatable set of Azure resources that implements and adheres to an organization's standard patterns and requirements. So basically, the blueprint makes it possible for the development team to rapidly build and start new environments with same trust that they are building within the organizational compliances with a set of built-in components such as networking, speeding up of development and the delivery. So basically it is a declarative way to orchestrate the deployment of various resource templates and other artifacts such as role assignments, policy assignment, ARM templates itself, resource groups. So, what is the advantage of deploying blueprints is like you can meet the regularity and the compliance standard. So, these blueprints include pre built templates for various architectures, which will help you organize your work as well as fasten your deployment rate. Next is track deployments. So in Azure portal, you can review the deployment history and get information about the template deployment. And you can also see the template that was deployed, the parameters value passed in, and any output values. Other infrastructure as a code service aren't tracked through the portal. So here, whatever your deployment history, you can track down the deployment history. You can also get to know which template has been deployed and what were the parameters under that particular template and what output did you get out of those templates. So you can have keep a track of each and every deployments. Next is exportable code. So here you can get a template for an existing resource group by either exporting the current state of the resource group or viewing the template used for that particular deployment. So viewing these exported template is a helpful way to learn about the template syntax. Lastly, policy as a code. So, Azure Policy, as we know, Azure Policy is a policy as a code framework to automate the governance. So, if you're using the Azure policies, policy remediation is done on the non compliant resources when deployed to the template. So, these are some of the key benefits of the advantages of ARM templates, which makes it more useful within the Azure environment. Now, let us understand what are templates. So basically, the template is a JavaScript object notation or a JSON file that defines the infrastructure and configuration of your project. As we had discussed before, to create a particular object, or if you want to run a particular resource, you need to specify what services you want to use and what are the parameters, its properties and its name, and all the information into a JSON file, and then you upload it. So it becomes a template. The JSON file is nothing but a template that is run inside the ARM, that is nothing but Azure Resource Manager. So the template uses a declarative syntax which lets you state what you intend to deploy without having to write the sequence of programming commands to create it. So in the template, you specify the resources to deploy and the properties for those resources. That is nothing but in the JSON file, you specify each and everything. What are the properties, whatever resources you want to deploy. And it becomes a template form and it gets deployed in the ARM. Now that we have understood what are templates, now let us understand the template design. So, defining the templates and the resource group is entirely up to you and how you want to manage your solution. For example, you can deploy your 3-tier application through a single template. So, as you can see in this diagram, so this is a 3-tier template. All right. So, in this template, you can run 3 types of application, that is virtual machine, app services, and SQL database. And it can be done within the one resource group itself. So here you don't have to define your entire infrastructure in a single template. Often it makes sense to divide your deployment requirements into a set of targeted purpose specific templates. But you can easily reuse these templates for a different solutions. So now if you see in this another diagram, you can also deploy a 3-tier solution through a parent class or in the nested form. So as you can see here, this is a parent template. Under this, we have created sub templates. That is, one template is for virtual machine, the second template is for app services, and the third one is for the SQL database. So here you can create it in the nested form as well. So it depends upon you how you need to design your own templates. And you can create different resource groups also, or you can add them into a single resource group. Now let us understand how do ARM templates work. So as you can see in this diagram, the ARM templates actually work on the hierarchical scope level. So as we know, there are different ways to create our resources like Azure Portal, Azure PowerShell, and Azure CLI. And apart from the Azure environment, we also have the third party clients, those are REST clients. So these are the different ways through which you can create your own resources and your resource groups as well. Once you start creating the resources in the Azure environment, so whenever you're creating a resource group or you're opting for a new service, so what happens that in the backend there creates a JSON file that is nothing but an ARM template. So as we discussed that ARM template is all about the JSON format. It has the JSON syntax. So whatever resources we would be creating or whatever services we would be opting within the Azure environment, that would be converted in the backend as the JSON file. And that JSON file then goes to our API, that is nothing but Azure Resource Manager API. So what does the Azure Resource Manager API do is that extract that file and then understands what are the requirements in that particular template. And for that, like now, if you're opting for a resource for any services from Azure, you always need a subscription. So it will check whether you are subscribed to Azure portal or not. Then, based on your subscriptions, it allows the particular resources to get deployed. So once your subscription is authenticated, then you have a resource provider. So in the ARM template, we specify what are the different services we want to opt for or what and all resources we require within the Azure environment. So it goes automatically into a resource provider, and within that, we can run multiple objects that are nothing but our services. For example, virtual machines, app services, storage account, and SQL. So this is how ARM templates or the whole Azure Resource Manager work. So in a just if I call it as is like whatever resource you are trying to create in the Azure portal or through PowerShell or through CLI or from any third party application. So it does have a template and in the backend, which is then extracted by the RM, that is Azure Resource Manager API. Then it processes the particular template for the deployment based on your subscriptions. Now we know that how templates usually work. It uses the JavaScript object notation syntax that also includes the advanced capabilities. So in this particular syntax, we have the different components. So the first component is the parameters. So what are actually parameters? So here the parameters allow you to pass the different values to the ARM template for use during the deployment. Some common examples like you can include the names of the resources or which Azure region to host them. So what do they do is it enables your templates to be more dynamic and used across the different environments. So parameters require a name and a type. So here you can include strings, array, objects, integers, boolean, or any secure string like password. Optionally, parameters also contain the discretion of how to use these particular parameters. So you can include default values to your parameters so that you do not need to provide one at runtime and you can configure it with a set number of values. So this configuration is helpful when you want to limit what SKUs or location a person can deploy the resources. The next component is functions. So in ARM template, functions allow you to create complicated expressions that you don't want to repeat throughout the template. So Here, what functions actually do is like there are a lot of functions in other programming language. Like when we code, you add on different kinds of function, like more than one function you can add. So you have a list of functions into it. But here you can tell them when you need to run them, and you can pass informations to them and expect the return value from there. For example, say you need to create a unique name of a resource. So instead of copying and pasting the same code to generate the unique name, you can create a function that makes the unique name. For example, if a function called as unique name with a parameter named prefix returns a unique name using the resource group ID. So here, note this namespace value. So this value can be anything you want. So here the functions require a different namespace value to avoid a naming conflict with the regular template function. Next is variables. So variables are not much different in ARM templates that you find it in other programming languages too. Here, the variables contains the values that are used repeatedly throughout the template. Like functions, you can use variables to create complicated expression. Like functions, you can also use variables to create complicated expression so that you don't have to repeat them into the same template. And like parameters, variables have the same data types such as strings, objects, and integers. So you can define variables using colon as a signed operator. For example, instead of passing the Azure region as a parameter, you can define it as a variable. So you can just type down location, and whichever required location you need, you can specify there. Next are resources. So what are resources basically? So the resources defines the Azure resources to deploy within the particular template. So the resources can be anything as small as a network security group, all the way to, like it can be virtual machine, storage account, or functions, or any other services which are within the Azure environment. So when you specify a resource, so you have to give a couple of explanation in each part. Like you need to specify the name of the resource, and then you also need to give the type of the resource you need to deploy. Whether you need to like refer to the high level family of the resource to deploy. For example, like Microsoft.compute, Microsoft.storage, or .network. So this will help you out to map out these resources to deploy more precisely. Next, you need to also specify the API version, that is like to check the configuration of that particular resource. So you also specify the dependencies. So here dependencies determine the order of Azure, how Azure should deploy these particular resources. So for example, if an ARM template is deploying a virtual machine and then a virtual network, so the virtual machine will exist first before creating a virtual network. And then you start giving up the properties. So here the properties contain the configuration information for the deployment. And last is the output. So the output section will define the values and information returned from the deployment. It is helpful for the data that Azure dynamically generates through the public IP address. So these are the key components that are used in ARM templates and which will help you to work with these Azure Resource Manager. Now that we have an overview on the ARM templates, and all the key concepts related to ARM templates, now let's have a quick demo and let's see how do they actually work. So for that, let's quickly move on to our Azure portal. So we need to first log into our Azure. So let's quickly sign in. So this is our Azure portal. Now, as we had discussed that there are different ways, like you can use the portal itself to create your services. As you can see here, there are different services you can opt for, like create a resource group or service bus, virtual machines, application gateways, etc. And you also have your CLI, that is your cloud shell. So you can even run your commands, and you can create your resource group. So let's see how are these templates created while we create a resource group or any resource through Azure portal. So let's quickly create a resource group first. So as you can see, we don't have any resource group yet. So let's quickly create a resource group. So we'll give any random name to it. So as it is ARM, let's give it a name as ARM demo 123. And you can choose any of your region as it's up to you, like it's of your choice based on your requirements. So I'll take West US because that region is more free. So let's review and create. And your validation is passed. Let's create. So when you see over here, your resource group has been created now. And now you can also see your ARM demo has been automatically created. I will just go inside. So now that we have created a resource group, now if I just go into their properties, like we just click onto this resource group and we'll just go to their export template. So here you can see the template has been created. So this is a snippet code where it shows whatever object you have created. So under that, what are the parameters and what are the variables you need to add. This happens in the backend once you create any resource or any resource group. So one of our folks have a doubt. Tejashwini has a doubt that how does these template create? So Tejashwini, as we had discussed before, that whenever you create anything in the Azure, no matter if it is a resource group or if you're using any services, so whatever resource you're creating, either it is through Azure portal or PowerShell or CLIs. So in the backhand, it automatically creates a JSON file. In the backend, it automatically creates a JSON file, which then becomes a template. It is formed in the backend process so that it goes to the ARM, that is our ARM API, Azure Resource Manager API, then it can process the rest of the resources accordingly. All right. So it is formed automatically. So whenever you create any resources or any services you're applying to or you're utilizing any resources and you create any resource, so it will create a template and that template will then go to the our ARM, and from there the whole process of the deployment starts. I hope you got an answer to your question. So as we have seen that we created a resource group, and as we go under their overview, you just come into these export template and here you find out your template, that is the JSON file, and you can even download it or you can send it to deploy as well. So now what we'll do, we'll create a resource within this resource group. So you can take any resources. So I'll just take up the storage account. Let's create a storage account at first. And our resource group is ARM demo 123. And now let's name our storage account as well. And we'll change our location. All right. And our performance would be standard because as our subscription is free and it is only for the demo purpose, so we'll be keeping everything as it is and we'll just review and create. All right. So here, as you see, they are initializing the template deployment to the resource group. So as I said, whatever resource you're creating, it automatically creates a template of that particular resource within that particular resource group. So now once it gets deployed, we'll see. So here you see the overview, the input and outputs and your template. So we'll just get into this and you see, this is the ARM template of our storage account. This is how your ARM templates are created. So this was all about ARM templates. I hope you found this session helpful. If you have any queries, you can leave your queries into the comment box. Until then, happy learning.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!